So throughout the day, we will be learning how to use the Cynefin framework in order to feel more comfortable with the increasing complexity that we face as a public service. Démystifier la complexité est le sujet parfait pour notre approche cette année, car la collaboration est le thème central qui nous permet d'identifier et de choisir les meilleures stratégies possibles. For the rest of the day, we'll be working with examples of problems that fall into four domains of the Cynefin framework, as we saw. We will use collaborative tools throughout the day to demonstrate how we can change and use collaboration to determine how to begin probing at a complex problem. We encourage you to have fun overall today, because that is an environment that will permit you to learn and retain the information that we're trying to share. It allows you to explore and really be yourself and to think outside of the box. And that is because we're trying to create a safe zone where you can actually have an opportunity to do that. Sometimes during our day jobs, we feel that we can't. So take advantage of this opportunity. We will use tools, as we approach each problem, we hope that we will ask ourselves the following question. La question vraiment à se poser est c'est dans quel des quatre domaines, dans quelle des quatre composantes qu'on retrouve chacune de ces situations. Donc, c'est vraiment la question avec laquelle on doit débuter. Et se poser, une fois qu'on a identifié le cadran ou la composante, se demander pourquoi on a choisi ce modèle. Complex problems, as Snowden explained to us, are challenging because they cause an effect and only apparent in hindsight. As a result, we are forced to take an approach to solving them and involving them, trying through different things and seeing different things that might emerge out of them. Our next activity will give us a sense of how we intend for you to actually practice and use applying the actual framework. Donc, c'est avec grand plaisir. It is with my pleasure that I would like to introduce our facilitator, our colleague extraordinaire, Blaise Hébert, de venir se joindre ici sur la scène pour pouvoir animer l'activité.
Alors, bonjour. Alors, pour l'activité d'aujourd'hui, je vais vous présenter un outil qui va nous aider à lier la complexité dans nos vies de tous les jours à celui ou à ceux qu'on va travailler plus tard aujourd'hui. C'est pour vous réduire la difficulté de comprendre quels sont les problèmes qu'on peut vraiment lier à des choses tangibles qu'on peut retrouver dans notre travail. Alors, so in English, what we're trying to do with this activity is we're trying to relate life events that show and break down the levels of complexity that we have, so that when we get into the complex problems for the day, we'll already be armed with some examples of how we actually deal with things. So before we actually begin with the exercise, I'd like to introduce our three co-panelists. If you could rise and come to the front, please. I don't want to clap because I feel it's going to Please sit down. Wait, before you sit down, sorry, I'll introduce my guests. So I have Paul DeChibita, Director General at Policy Horizons Canada. Next we have Pascal Elvas from Shared Services Canada, and Marc Gagnon from Border Services Canada, Canadian Border Services. Thank you, please sit down. So, what will happen here today is, I know you're all stressed because they're not facing in front of you, so you don't know what's going on here. Don't worry about it, it's all good. What's going to happen today is I'm going to have a conversation with them about problems that they've probably already faced, some of them maybe not, and how they would have dealt with the situation in the first place. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on va faire aujourd'hui, c'est que je vais avoir une discussion avec les trois panélistes ici sur des problèmes qu'ils ont probablement déjà eu dans le passé, ou même peut-être pas, mais je vais leur demander d'imaginer comment travailler avec ces problèmes-là. Could we turn off my mic? Thank you. Great. Alors, comment on va interagir entre les panélistes, moi et l'audience. c'est que les panélistes vont répondre à des questions que je vais leur demander. Alors, comment identifier, à partir du désordre, quand on se place dans le désordre avec un problème, identifier quelle sorte de problème est-ce que ça pourrait être et quelles seront les actions qu'ils pourraient émettre pour régler le problème. So what we will do is I will ask the participant questions about problems that they will find from the disorder and move into the categorization of the sense-making framework of understanding where they would lie by using the actions that were described behind us. Now, what I want the audience to do in retrospect is to mentally do the same thing. You have been given 4 or 2 cardboard cutouts of 4 colors. And when I talk about a problem, I want you to raise the color that you think is the right one. Alors, quand je vais poser la question sur le problème, je vais demander à l'audience de me montrer le carton de couleur associé au problème identifié. Alors, pour vous rappeler, quand c'est un problème simple, c'est la couleur rose, it's the color pink. Quand c'est un problème compliqué, complicated is purple, complex is blue, I think, yes, blue, and emergent, chaotic is yellow, alors le chaotique est le jaune. So, where are my notes? That's my phone, it's okay, it's technology. Okay, so on va essayer un problème test que je demandais à l'audience ici. Et puis, I want you guys to actually raise your cardboard of your color of the one that you think is signifying. So, how would you guys classify plugging in a USB as a problem? Would that be simple, complicated, complex, or even chaotic? Would someone like to begin? Mark, would you like to begin?
Simple.
It's simple. Why would it be simple?
Have instructions and categorize it. I've experienced it before.
Okay. Pascal?
I would go with simple as well. I don't know, simple task of execution. Point A to point B.
Okay. Paul, what would you say?
Simple as well. The only challenge is trying to find a hole and trying to get it the right way. But
Okay. What would the audience think? Oh wow, I've got a couple chaotics up here. Okay. If ever there's confusion between the panelists and they're not sure where to go, I'm going to rely on the audience to tell them what the answer is. Is that okay with you guys? Yeah. Excellent. All right. So la première question que j'ai pour aujourd'hui, c'est si on avait à préparer la recette, la fameuse recette de votre grand-mère de sauce aux tomates, comment est-ce qu'on classifierait ce problème-là? Est-ce que ça serait du désordre? Est-ce que ça serait un problème simple, problème compliqué, complexe ou même chaotique? Paul, comment est-ce que tu nous décrirais ça?
Well, I actually have some practical experience with this because I actually do follow my grandmother's recipe. I make a sauce almost every year, and it's a very effort-induced, instructional-based exercise that takes a full day, a number of people. We start from the tomatoes and take it all the way to making the sauce itself. So as long as I have or remember all the things that I have to do in a very ordered way, and I have the manpower to get me through it, I could get through the night, through the whole day, and have my sauce ready for the whole year.
So would you consider it a simple, or complicated, or complex problem?
I would say it's complicated.
Complicated, okay. And you would say that because of the expertise required?
Yes, it involves expertise. You need to follow certain instructions in order to get the sauce to its ready state by the end of the day. And it's repetitive as well. I've done it several years, and as long as I stick to the script, that's been proven over years and years and years, it usually does not give me any problems.
Okay. Do any of you have reactions to that?
I would agree. There's definitely special competencies required to make grandma's sauce, and some analysis required. I don't know about you, but my grandma's recipe is a pinch of this, a dash of that, just a little bit of that, and so I need to kind of try to make sense of.
Wow, that sounds more complex than complicated. Do you have to experiment sometimes to try to get it right?
Indeed, and a lot of taste tests.
Okay, lots of taste tests.
Indeed.
So experimentation's probing to see if you've got the right elements. Okay. Okay, Mark, what do you think? While Mark is giving us his answer, just raise your cards to tell me what the audience actually thinks between the different problems. Okay, go ahead, Mark. Oh.
Alors, pour moi, ce sera un problème complexe.
Okay. Pourquoi est-ce que ça, c'est complexe, hein?
For my recipes that I follow, or there's an oral history involved. There isn't a recipe, and so it is that about amplifying. Is that pinch too much? Is it a pinch for Paul's fingers, or is it a pinch of Blaze's fingers? For me, it's toujours un cas de essayer et de réagir. How did it taste? What did I roast tomatoes too long? Was it 25 minutes or as opposed to 35 minutes? And what was the effect on that?
Interesting. That's very good. Okay, okay. And so just raise it one last time. I just want to see what the level is in the room between, oh, wow, you guys shifted. You're about 50% in complex now. We've really shifted. That's really good. That's good. Okay, so just remember the difference between the types of actions that you would take between a complicated problem and a complex problem. Complex problem requires, like Mark said, what are the amplifying and dampening strategies that you're going to use throughout that? So our second problem, I actually have a piece of paper. It's even better. Sorry about that. Our second problem is, if you were to grow a rose garden in your backyard, would you consider that a complicated, simple, chaotic, or complex problem? Pascal?
I think it's relatively simple. Little pruning, little watering, hope for the best, tender loving care.
Okay, okay. Would you think that hoping for the best has...
Hope is not a strategy.
Oh, hope is not a strategy. Oh, okay. Very good. Okay. Mark, what would you think?
Alors, pour moi, je reviens aux les commentaires de M. Ian Sugartam when he said, you have to unpack it. So what kind of questions do I want? And there'll probably be smiles in the room. What kind of rose garden do I want? Is it a prize-winning rose garden? Do I have the expertise that tells me, am I new at this? What kind of questions am I asking myself? Am I coming from living in a condo to living in a backyard where I don't know the soil conditions? I haven't gone out and asked my neighbors, what kind of things work well for you? What kind of things don't work well for you? And for me, again, it's about seeking that expertise.
Okay.
So complex.
So you think it's a complex problem. Interesting. Paul, what do you think?
I agree. I think it is complex, and the reason why I think so is because there's a certain amount of uncertainty when it comes to the climate or the weather. Of course, when you're planting or a garden, you're doing it for several months in advance, and of course that has a very big impact on the success of your garden. So understanding or being prepared for changing weather, especially if it's close to the beginning of the planting season and there's days of frost, I would think that there would be a little bit of uncertainty that I would have to navigate through.
Oh, that's very good. So you also think that it's complex?
Complex, yes.
Okay. What does the audience think? Oh, more complex than complicated, that's for sure. Oh, Pascal, does anybody think that it's simple? Any simple out there? We have a couple simples. So you guys are, do you assume that or think that you have the proper expertise to manage a rose garden? Is that?
If I could answer, I would say that planting a rose garden relies on best practices established for generations.
Interesting. That's very good. Okay, thank you. All right. You can at any point, if you're lost, turn to the audience and say, audience, I need some help. It's
A lifeline.
a lifeline. Your audience is your lifeline, but they might be very chaotic with their answer also. Wonderful. OK, alors c'est drôle parce que Paul a mentionné justement que un des facteurs importants dans le dernier problème était celui de la météo. Alors, si on avait le problème de prédire la météo, dans quelle catégorie est-ce qu'on se retrouverait, Paul?
If we were to be trying to predict the weather, well, I would think it's still complex. And the reason why I think that is that there are a number of experts that are very much capable of doing this and do it with a reasonable amount of accuracy. We employ quite a number of meteorologists and climatologists at Environment Canada that actually run very, very complex, to use the term, models that do a reasonable job. I think that there is some base to reduce that uncertainty, so that's why I think it's still complex.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Marc, que penses-tu?
Alors pour moi encore, c'est une question d'avoir accès aux des experts. You mentioned weather experts or the weather, and if I look on right today, if I looked at the weather, there's probably 5 or 6 people who would tell me that it was snowing or that we didn't expect this snow. So there's probably 5 or 6 different opinions out there in terms of experts. Alors pour moi, c'est une question de utiliser l'information que nous avons devant nous. So from that, again, I still think predicting the weather is complex. There's people that are using different tools. There's different degrees of definition. Am I talking Doppler? Am I talking different types of technology that I can use to pinpoint weather? Pardon me.
Thank you. Pascal?
Ben, pour moi, si on essaie de prédire la météo, ça devient un problème complexe parce qu'évidemment, les résultats sont imprévisibles.
C'est bon, c'est bon. OK. L'audience, que pensez-vous pour prédire? Excellent. Tu vois, j'ai une coupe de chaotique dans le système. Would there be someone with a loud enough voice that could talk about their chaotic view? From the back.
My feeling on this is that even though we do have complex systems out there and proper expertise available, we understand that maybe there's budget issues or resource issues that make it that the models are not updated, or at least that's what's being told. Which means that some model works sometimes, other model works other times, and we're supposed to figure all of that out. So to me, it ends up being a chaotic environment.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay. So, funnily enough, we have another tomato sauce question. What if you were to just heat up a can of tomato sauce? What kind of problem would that be? From starting, so the starting point is disorder. You have the can of tomato sauce. What is the way that you actually handle this problem? Marc?
I'm not going to talk about rose gardens. So for me, it's a very un problème simple.
OK. OK. Un problème simple.
Oui.
Comment est-ce que tu prendrais soin du problème simple? C'est quoi les étapes que tu ferais? Est-ce que tu sentirais, would you try to use practice that you've done in the past to handle this?
Well, I'm not sure my opening a can would be considered a good practice or a best practice. Certainly my experience of opening up cans and putting them on the stove, I have been able to do that. I can get a sense of what's needed, what's required to heat up the can of tomato sauce.
That's good. All right.
I too would see it as a simple process. It's not many steps involved. It's something that we do on a regular basis. But it also depends on the context. If you rephrase the question to say, how about if you had to open up this can in the wilderness without a can opener? Well, then it becomes a little bit more of a complex problem.
So context is everything in this case.
Indeed, where you are. Yeah.
Very good, very good. Pascal, do you have a differing view, or you think it's also?
Well, speaking of context being everything, I think it depends on the level of effectiveness of your can opener, because the predictable and repeatable for me on my can opener is somewhat, hit or miss, but no, I would agree, it's a simple problem.
Okay, okay. That's good, thank you. You should get a better can opener. What does the audience think? Oh, simple, 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 chaotic. Oh no, simple. Oh no, a couple complicated. Interesting, okay, okay, good, good. Why do you think it's a complicated process?
Well, for the same reason, it depends on the context.
Context is everything.
If I had to explain to you how to heat up a can of tomatoes at my place, you'd have to find the can opener, find the pot. If I have to do it myself, it's easy enough.
Oh, that's good. That's good, thank you. OK, disons que vous aviez assemblé un meuble IKEA.
Chaotic. Just getting through IKEA, from start to finish. I may have been there this weekend.
Was it a chaotic experience?
Yes, it was. And I had to bag my own items.
Oh, that's fair.
No. Sorry.
So that's okay. That's okay. So how would you categorize?
Yeah, the cause and effect relationship is hard to establish. No, I guess it depends on your level of experience with the task.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you were to have a manual, an instructions manual, how would that help alleviate some of the concerns that you have?
It would definitely help depending on your ability to follow instruction.
Oh, okay. I see. I see. So there has to be a certain adherence to the process.
Right.
If you had a friend to help you out with that, would that make the problem?
Or a friend to whom you could delegate.
Oh, a friend to whom you can delegate, even better. Okay. So, so would you categorize that a complex or a complicated problem?
All right, I'll go with complicated.
Well, oh, why would you go for complicated?
Well, it's not complex because there are instructions and there's an established process, but it's definitely not simple.
That's great. I'm happy to hear that. Unless Mark will tell me that it's simple and then he does this every week.
No, I won't say that it's simple. Alors pour moi encore, c'est un cas de, you mentioned it becomes or it is complicated. There's instructions for me to follow. I can follow those diagrams. So.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think the fact that there are instructions that are usually clear fits right into my definition of complicated.
Oh, that's very good. What about the audience? How do you feel about okay, wow, we have some experts in the room, it seems. That's very good. Okay, we had a couple of yellows. To the front, you think that you had the yellow up. Why do you think it's chaotic?
I find the instructions are not clear, the pictures are out of order, and what should be a simple task takes me 2 to 3 hours, and by the time I'm done, it's usually in the garbage.
So lack of a clear process. So lack of a clear process is the problem that brings it from a complicated to a chaotic one. Well, that's very good. Very interesting. Okay, we have a couple more. Back to our tomato sauces. If I were to ask you to invent a brand new tomato sauce recipe, what kind of problem would that be if you stand from the area of disorder, moving into trying to sense where to be the right place? What kind of problem would that be? Since you're the tomato.
I think it would squarely lie in complex, and the reason is that you're now moving into territories where you're trying to predict what people like. You're trying to predict with how different ingredients are going to interact. So I think it's this external agent issue where you're trying to find out what they think and how things actually will behave amongst themselves, way away from your own level of control.
Okay, that's really good. Mark.
Alors, tu as changé la contexte de cette question-là. Et pour moi, c'était what could have been a complicated process moves it into a complex process where I need to now experiment, try things, add things, subtract things from this recipe. Alors pour moi encore, c'est le contexte qui est très important de essayer de gérer la situation.
OK. Pascal?
I would go with complex because in this case, hindsight is 20/20 vision, and there's no established good practice. You're dealing with experimentation. So.
Did you put too much salt in the last recipe that you tried to create?
You can never have too much salt.
Oh! Audience! Blue again. Blue is complex. Got a couple chaotics. Can a chaotic stand up and tell me why they would find that chaotic?
When I was standing up, and I'll bellow for you.
Perfect.
It's kind of a cross between the two. Like you're saying, context is everything. If you take it by definition of how you got to broke it down under the character about acting and sensing, that would be definitely a style of cooking I would do. Is that I just start throwing things together, see how it tastes, and adjust as I go. And then hopefully at some point at the end, I'll figure it out with a combination of certain expertise and a certain amount of pull.
That's good. So you would say that you're a very novel thinker.
Yeah, I like looks.
Okay, good. All right, I got an easy one for you. Ordering a cup of coffee at Tim Hortons. Is that simple, complicated, complex, or chaotic? While you guys are talking, I want you to start holding up your choices. We'll see how this one fares. Pascal, what do you think?
One would hope that it would be simple and that the link between cause and effect would be quite clear and straightforward.
Okay, but?
Well, context is everything.
You said
and hope is not a strategy.
Hope is not a strategy. We look at the past and we say hope is not a strategy. How does that fare in real life? What are the things that could make it different?
Well, I guess it depends the time of day in which you're going in to Tim Hortons and how busy they are, how many people are working, and how many of them are on training.
Okay. That's very good. Okay. So would that change it from a simple problem?
I hope not.
Okay.
But I'm sticking to simple.
Okay, sticking to simple. All right, Mark, what do you think?
The simple act of ordering a coffee of Tim Hortons coffee would be simple. The context in which I'm operating, am I late for a meeting? Is it all I want for a coffee? Do I have time to wait in this lineup? And it builds on what you said earlier about having the time. So it can flutter between simple and complicated depending on where I am at a particular point in time.
Okay. Paul?
Well, notwithstanding the context, I think it's clearly a simple problem.
Really?
I get the feeling of where you're coming from, Blaise. It's because it involves interactions that you might think it's complex, but I know Blaise, so. But I think it's clearly a simple problem.
Okay. Well, I'm actually, no, I'm not even going to take the mic. We actually labeled that one. Actually, I'll let the audience raise your hand which color you think it is, and then we'll tell you what we were thinking of what it was. So we have mostly simple, a couple of chaotics, and one person who thinks that this is a complex problem. Could you tell us why you think this is a complex problem?
Is that me?
Yes?
Well, I guess sometimes you don't know what you're getting if they say double this or double that, and you don't know if it's a double large cream or the small cream or whatever, so if you order your coffee and you tell what it is, you get.
That's a great way of thinking it. And so it's funny because we actually labeled it down as a complex problem. The reason why we labeled it down as a complex problem is because, like Paul said, it involves human interaction. And human interaction we see human interactions as mostly simple because sometimes we don't understand the culture, the practice that we all have inherent to the conversations that we have between each other. So a simple problem could actually lie, and if we're not careful, like in Snowden's video, if we apply best practice to a complex problem, we might fall ourselves into the zone of the chaotic, fall ourselves in a crisis if we're not mindful of these things. Okay? So, mange une pomme. Mange une pomme. Fun.
Well, I would think that's quite simple. You know, there's a few steps. Wash it and then start biting. However,
Be mindful of the razor blades. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
But again, if I would be doing it for my son, who is very particular in how he likes to eat his apples, then it would kind of start getting into the complicated part. He's got to cut it a certain way and.
Thank you, Paul. Mark.
Alors, je suis en accord. Pour moi, ce serait un problème simple.
Okay, simple. Okay. Pascal.
Je suis d'accord, problème simple.
Problème simple. Okay. All right. How about breaking up a rioting mob? Go ahead.
Chaotic. No cause and effect.
No cause and effect whatsoever.
And emergent solutions welcome.
Emergent?
Well-
Emerging or novel?
Well, yeah. I think you're in a situation where you need to be reactive and responsive and constantly analyzing the context and adjusting your approach
Okay.
accordingly.
So act, sense after you act and respond as a result. Oh, okay, good. Mark.
Complex.
Whoa. Bold.
Again, I can, depending on my role in this situation, I can either decide to bring out the water bombs. If it doesn't work, then take it to the next level. I can act and respond, amplify and dampen my reaction to this. Certainly, as a manager, for me, that's where I could take a look at the situation and say, how is it progressing along this continuum of, well, maybe even through this traveling there through this quadrant.
Okay, good. Paul?
I take Mark's point, and I can understand how we could see it as complex, because there are certain strategies that have been developed for that. But I would still feel it would be chaotic, because even these strategies are not always effective as they think they are or as they plan them to be. When you're dealing with a group of people that may have divergent views and have emotional considerations as well in the mix, I would feel a bit more comfortable classifying that as chaotic.
Okay. Audience? Some complex, lots of chaotic. Oh wow. I got a couple simples up there. Could someone simple actually respond to that?
That's a loaded question.
No, sorry. Could someone, wow, that was really bad. I apologize for that. I'm so sorry. So could someone who raised a simple answer or a simple problem, please tell us why? I have two. No? Okay. We'll leave it at that. Oh, yes. Yes, you have it.
Say simple, but I think it's complicated for police forces that are well trained in doing it, but it can quickly degenerate into chaotic.
Okay, so I take your point.
It's complicated, but it degenerates to chaotic.
The level of expertise can add or lessen some of the problems. Okay, that's very good. Thank you. Okay, we have two more, and then we'll be ending this. Tuning up a Ferrari. Mark, I'm sorry, I have to give you this, because, you like cars. Here you go.
Oh, it's one that I'd have to think on. I'm definitely, myself, I wouldn't tune it up. The process of tuning up a Ferrari, I would probably leave that to the experts and perhaps squarely in the quadrant of complicated.
Okay. Pascal, how would you tune up your Ferrari?
Well, I would agree that it's a complicated problem best suited to another individual than myself. And so I guess I would sense and analyze the problem and react accordingly. So, I mean, if it's about, I guess, I guess the degree of the problem at hand. Like, is it that we're missing windshield washer fluid? Is it that the brakes are squeaking? Does it just need gas? And then I would adjust my approach.
So
But-
again, the context would be
Right.
very important
Yeah.
here. Okay, good. Paul?
I would raise the same arguments that Mark did, exactly. However, for the same reasons, I would see that as complex. If your example was perhaps using a car, and I appreciate you're a car guy, if you were choosing an Audi or something that is a bit more mainstream, I would perhaps think it was complicated.
Okay.
But underneath the hood of a Ferrari, there's really novel type of technologies in there, and it's not as easy as going to an Audi forum or and getting the instructions and trying to do it. It's if I had a Ferrari, I would be not doing it myself.
Okay, so complicated and maybe complex.
Yeah, more on the complex.
More on the complex. Okay, interesting. Audience? All right, so a mix of complicated and wow, we actually have a couple of chaotics up here. If I point to you in the middle with a chaotic, how would you frame that?
Well, I would probably bring
Okay, so the level of expertise is definitely something that's lacking in this case. Okay, good. For our last problem, emergency response to a natural disaster. You can raise them up if you want.
Not sure. Well, I think I think I would lie in between complex and chaotic. I've been in these so-called war rooms before, and there is process, there's strategy, there's order in terms of dealing with these issues, even though there's so much uncertainty and lack of information. So that's why that I can, depending on how new this is. Let me say it this way. If it was an environmental disaster and I was back at Environment Canada, then I would probably think it would be a complex. If I'm in my home and there's some flood, that would definitely be chaotic for me, because I wouldn't know what to do, and I would have to really dig into my bag of novel tricks to make sure that I'm safe and out of danger. Yeah.
That's really good. Thank you, Paul.
Alors, pour moi, c'est un problème chaotique.
Okay.
For me, as a person, I've not only got myself to think about, I've got other loved ones to think about. As a first responder, I'm not sure what other people are going to, where they're at within this particular context. What are their primary expectations in terms of me as a service provider? And I have to interact with that, and that's a great unknown for me. So perhaps chaotic.
Oh, wow. Okay, good. Very touching.
Yeah, for me, it's a mix of complex and chaotic. So I think a traditional national disaster would be complex, but there are emergency plans and disaster recovery protocols and best practices to follow. But I think it can very quickly tip over into the chaotic as soon as you have a new emerging issue that has all kinds of complex interrelations and interdependencies with other things, public safety, security. And so I think it's a mix, but it can very easily and quickly tip over into chaotic.
Okay. But when it keeps into the complex, would you say that the best way to handle this is by, what would be the best way to handle this? If this were...
Assemble a team of experts and deploy quickly.
Collaboration is still
exactly.
the answer. Oh, that's very good. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank my participants, and I would like to thank the audience and thanking my participants, Paul DiCivita from Policy Horizons, from USA, and Pascal from Shared Services. Thank you very much. And with that, we will be on our way.